Well, that was quick. Nice. Thank you very much, YouTube, for cooperating with me. Of course, the moment I'm early is always when it's quick, but either way, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a while since I've done one of these. Actually, since that I've got my main monitor for everything right now, when was the last time I did one of these? Let's see. Oh. Alright, so live section. I feel like it's been a couple months, right? React Night. When was the last one? Oh, it's been almost 6 months. Oops. Sorry about that. So, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a long time since we've done one of this. Naturally, having left it alone so long, there's a decent backlog of stuff that has been viewer requested, as well as a decent number of things I've seen in the feed that I've got from the Unscripted channel on things that are viable to talk about here. And I figured, you know what? With Fallout being a simpler game that should be easier to pick up and put down, I'm thinking it makes sense to start slowly whittling away at everything therein. So, my thinking is we'll slowly whittle away at everything therein. So, we've got a few small videos with respect to Pikmin, since that we recently played through the first game. We've got a video that was recommended talking about Frieren's Demons again, which hopefully will be better than the last one, although not a high bar. And then if we have time, I've got one of my own choosing, as well as a longer video that should be interesting, hopefully. Yes, I am using Linux. I forget that that happens when I go hover that corner. Either way. So, let's see. Is there anything I need to see to in chat before we begin? Hi, Gray. How you doing? I have some things to do, so if you could, I'd appreciate if you could hold off on the demon video for until I get back. Well, given that I don't know when you'll be back, I guess we'll see how it times out. I guess I can rearrange things a little bit, save it for closer to the end. That should be fine. I got an NSO N64 controller recently. Oh, hello, Gilgamesh. So, my favorite one is, let's see, OC, well, actually, I don't recognize that name for as far as Pikmin videos are concerned. I'm certain I will see it before too long, if it is, well, given the circumstance. So, that in mind, nothing for it but to get started. So, I guess, with respect to the Pikmin stuff, we recently played through the first game. I've got the second one in my back pocket if I ever want to do something different, though recently I wanted to go back to the CRPG well, do something different, and it's been a good time so far, to be fair, but English. After we had finished going through it, we had 3 videos pop up, all of which are fairly short, as you can see. So, let's go ahead and take a look at these. I have no idea what to expect. I believe a couple of them are related to stuff that you can run into on the first game, and then another is just something correlating with Pikmin. So, let's take a look. So, there's a number of these shorts. Well, I only went with the one that I saw in Discord, so we won't be going through all of them today. I'll make sure to look at them later, though. Either way, so there's a bunch of those, presumably. I guess I'll have to go check them out another time. Probably won't get through all of them. Let's see, send something to Discord? Okay, let's take a look real quick. React submissions. Another one of them. Let's see. Actually, it's the occupational hazard one here, right? Okay. Well, we'll see. We can double back to it if we have time. How's that sound? Alrighty, so there were a couple of others you wanted me to look at. One of them was, let's see, I don't recognize this particular boss. I don't think. I think this was one of the special ones I had to encounter if I had gone to a particular place soon enough. So, let's go ahead and take a look. So this is after presumably breaking up an egg. Or at least aggroing it. Alright, so you leave that group behind. And this is on the Wii version, which, if memory serves, is one of the versions which tends to be a little janky, I believe. Based on what's been said by chat. Oh, I see, you're just gonna Zarbama, aren't you? Is that how this is gonna work? Let's see. So in order to see this one, you have to get to water before day 15. Okay, fair enough. Let's see, stream quality good. Yeah, looks like it. Can't tell if the low frame rate is on his end or mine. Could be either one, to be fair. Alright, so I guess the idea is that you position yourself in such a way to where you're able to avoid aggroing him, and are able to just consistently throw bombs at him until he eventually goes down. It seems to be the trend anyway. Let's see, with the number of bombs that have been hit, it looks like you'd need to do 3 or 4 more. Of course, gotta wait till you're not aggroed, or I guess you can wait until he does that. Wasn't able to throw one of the bomb ones, huh? Is it slowly healing? Interesting. Alright, so when it does that, that gives you an opportunity where it's not explicitly chasing after you. Okay. I think I'd get the general gist. Let's see. Alright, we'll let the video keep playing. Let's see. This thing is very difficult to take down because it'll poison your Pikmin. Oh boy. So basically, bombs are the only option you have in order to avoid getting murked by it, huh? Seems to be the case anyway. Gotta wait for it to do that. And then presumably that bomb will be the last one required? Yes. Alright, fair enough. Let's see, any more with this? It doesn't look it. Either way. Alright, fair enough. So, if it makes contact with your Pikmin, it's instant death? Oh, jeez. So, yeah, you have to use the bombs then. Alrighty, so that was one thing. And then the other was a bad ending. Let's see, resolution's better. So, 2 years ago. So, presumably this was... having trouble finding good high-quality HD versions. So, presumably... after Pikmin 1 and 2 released. At least on Switch. So in order to trigger this, let's see. The day when my life support systems fail has come. I have collected only 5 ship parts. I have no choice but to attempt to launch the Dolphin into space, incomplete as it is. The ship doesn't need every lost part in order to fly. For better or worse, I must go. Away we go. And then you've got the Pikmin looking back. Yep. Is this where we get to see it crash back down? Oh wow, they actually do show it crashing back down. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, and then it'll show you as the same way, well, the same way as before. Makes sense. And then, of course, the Pikmin will just treat you as another thing to collect. Because it seems as if they can collect practically anything. Okay, then. But why would that create a unique Pikmin type? No matter. So, that was everything I needed to see to for Pikmin tonight. If there's any more that we have time for, we'll see to it near the end. So let's see, is there anything I missed in chat? Because it looks like Gilgamesh has been active. Let's see. Alright, looks like I got everything important. So, I guess then, we'll go ahead and move on to the next thing on the chopping block. Yes, I know it's a bad ending, but still. Wonder why they set it up that way. No matter. For now then, next thing on the chopping block. Let's see, I can't remember when I first saw this. As you can tell, this has existed for a while. I can't remember exactly when I saw it show up in my feed. But my thought was, when I saw this, it was, well, around the same time that I had seen this, I had also seen, I think it was some press release or a discussion during an earnings call or something to that effect from, I believe it was someone important at Atlas, who are known for Persona, where they were discussing that they were having difficulty ensuring that they could remain solvent because I think it was either expenses getting too high or something else to that effect, to where they were concerned they'd have to start looking at a broader audience or something else to that effect. So, given how much Atlas puts into their games, it's unsurprising that it would eventually reach this point, and funnily enough, we're already seeing that somewhat play out with Creative Assembly, which is another which is another studio owned by Sega. So, where eventually you reach an upper limit as to how many people you can reasonably bring on entice into playing a game, but eventually, you hit that upper limit, and then what do? Creative Assembly's choice has been to just try and get more money out of the current consumer base, which has had a slowly deteriorating result, as you might expect. And I don't know what Atlas inevitably plans, but as a result of that, I don't know if it's necessarily in response to that, I don't believe it is, but around the same time that I see that, I see this video pop up, and I think JRPGs keep targeting the wrong audience. Okay, what's that mean? Because I am, with respect to JRPGs, am somewhat of an outsider, where I haven't played too many. I think you've got a few Square Enix titles, Pokemon and Xenoblade, as the primary ones that I've played, and maybe a couple gacha, depending on how you look at them. But as a result of that, I'm thinking, so which target audience are JRPGs primarily aiming for? Is that the audience that they are principally, is the stated audience they're targeting the actual audience they're targeting? And what should they be going for? So, thought it would be interesting to look at, so may as well take a look, right?
JRPGs aren't failing because people don't understand them. They're struggling because they keep trying to impress people who are never gonna play them in the first place. Over the last decades, JRPGs have become more expensive, more polished, but even more uncertain than they've ever been. Every time a new one releases and misses its sales target, the same conclusion gets drawn: the genre needs to change.
Okay, I see where the spin is now, because I think it was Final Fantasy VII Remake, which did incredibly well because, Final Fantasy VII, but then you look at Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I think it did what? And then, I can't remember the exact number. I think the first part of the remake trilogy did, 7 million or so, and I think when I saw a sales figure for Rebirth, it was 2 million. And if they're putting about the same effort into both, then yeah, that's a serious dip. And to be fair, there are people who will buy the original who are not, or at least the first entry, who will not necessarily carry on. Especially since it's a direct continuation. And especially since they know now, okay, this isn't a strict remake, you're putting in a lot of other stuff into here, so maybe we wait until everything is released. And that's what I've been doing for the Final Fantasy VII Remake. My feeling is, I'm just going to wait until the entire trilogy is out, let people figure out what they're doing there, and they did just recently announce the final part is coming, and then I'll go for it. Although, it did start on Epic Game Store, and by my usual standard, I avoid stuff that does, but at the same time, I don't know, their future stuff hasn't, so I'm not sure how to approach that one. Either way, it's not something I need to worry about for a while yet, anyway. So, we'll see what happens. Let's see, Final Fantasy only has that problem as Falcom or other niche games? Well, that's the thing, anyway. Well, that's the thing, though, is that you will have the niche guys who will focus on what they do well, but Square Enix, because they're a big corporation that is trying to branch out and do all sorts of other stuff, are going to be principally running into that problem with Final Fantasy, and it wouldn't surprise me if the bottom starts falling out even on Dragon Quest with how much they've focused more on remaking stuff rather than making new stuff. And it looks like I'm peaking on OBS. I'm going to turn my mic volume down a little bit. Let me know how that sounds. I feel this video will treat JRPGs as only Final Fantasy. Well, we'll take a look. We'll see what happens. Well, actually, here's an important question. Because wasn't there some brouhaha about the studio for Unicorn Overlord having trouble making their sales? I can't remember the exact scenario. I think there was a point where they were nearly insolvent or nearly had to close, and yet they refused to release on PC. So I remember there being some brouhaha around that. So I'd be curious to know what sort of examples are brought up. So we'll let the video keep going. We'll see what kind of things it brings up.
But what if that assumption is backwards? What if JRPGs aren't growing by evolving, but they're shrinking by negotiating? Because when a genre starts designing itself around what won't scare people away, it stops asking what made people fall in love with it to begin with. And
okay, so it's taking the usual approach that a lot of genres have been encountering lately. Let's see, Falcom sells very well. Haven't they been getting diminishing returns as well? I'd have to go digging on that, though.
that hesitation, not length, not complexity, not even turn-based combat, that hesitation is the real problem JRPGs are facing right now. There's an idea that sits underneath a lot of modern JRPGs, whether anyone wants to say it out loud or not. The idea is simple though. If a JRPG wants to survive, they need to appeal to people who don't usually play JRPGs in order to continue growing the audience.
Okay, but that's the assumption that a lot of genres and a lot of companies have made. I've brought up examples of my own in different different arenas over on the review channel. So is that, well, again, you are showing a lot of Final Fantasy, but well, to be fair, I'm not as familiar with other JRPGs, but let's see what else you got.
The solution becomes to remove friction, smooth out the edges, and make the genre much easier to approach. But this way of thinking assumes something that isn't actually true. It assumes that JRPGs are struggling because new players don't understand why people like them. But the thing is, JRPGs aren't misunderstood. They're very recognizable and well known, and in many cases incredibly successful. Final Fantasy doesn't need an introduction to a gamer. They already know what it is. Persona doesn't need to explain itself, and Dragon Quest has already been doing the same thing for decades, and people still show up to support it.
Okay, well, there's the request from chat to show something other than Final Fantasy, so I didn't recognize the one immediately after all the Final Fantasy examples, but Persona, Dragon Quest, I mean, they've been trucking along, although I'll be curious to see what Atlas does for the next one, but no matter.
Yuji Horii, the Dragon Quest director, has repeatedly said that Dragon Quest prioritizes familiarity and accessibility and not chasing trends, because players come to the series knowing exactly what experience they want. The problem isn't that people don't get JRPGs, it's that some people just don't want what JRPGs are offering. And that's an important distinction. Long stories, complex and heavy systems, and stylized presentation, combat that makes you slow down and think. When it comes to JRPGs, these aren't obstacles standing in the way of success. They're the reason the genre exists at all. But
yeah, that tracks with what I'm aware of, but I'd be curious to know, well, it's going to be a relatively long video. I feel like it feels like you're just preaching to the choir here. Let's see I don't know how long we'll be going with this, but we'll keep going.
Over time, those traits started being treated less like strengths and more like things that needed to be apologized for.
Well, I know we're still technically in the introduction, but let's see, the JRPG that grew without. Well, let's see if you can bring some more concrete examples, although presumably this looks like it's speaking to the choir. Let's see if you can bring an explicit example of that.
See the shift pretty clearly in how modern JRPGs talk about themselves. Instead of confidently presenting what they are, They often lead with what they aren't. You'll hear things like, it's faster. Oh no, it's much more action focused. This one is designed for newcomers. Or even if you don't like JRPGs, you'll like this one because it's different.
Can you offer some examples? I know people said that about Expedition 33, even though it's in the same style, but it's made by a French studio. But care to give some examples?
And I feel like that last one is especially telling because when a game goes out of its way to reassure people who don't like the genre, it's quietly signaling uncertainty to the people who already do. This is where the audience problem starts to form. Not because the developers are out of touch, and not because the genre is outdated, but because JRPGs are increasingly being designed to expand their audience and don't address the core audience that was never really asking for them to change in the first place. And when a genre starts making decisions that way, something subtle begins to happen. It stops asking itself, how can we expand on what we do best? And starts asking, how can we make this reach more people? Now
Okay, again, I feel like you're starting to repeat yourself and it's already just the first 3 minutes. We'll give it another minute, see if there are some interesting examples brought up, and if not, we'll move on to the next.
shift doesn't kill a genre overnight, but it does make it begin to feel more and more cautious. It makes it feel hesitant. And over time, it makes it harder for any one game to feel confident about what it actually wants to be. And once that confidence starts to fade, everything else begins to follow. To understand how JRPGs ended up here, you have to look at the pressure they've been under and why playing it safe started to feel like the only option. Growth itself isn't the problem. Every genre has to evolve, new players have to come in, and expectations shift and technology opens up different doors that didn't exist. JRPGs expanding their audience isn't a betrayal of the genre, it's a necessity, but the difference is how that expansion happens.
Okay, can we get some examples? Let's see, you just went to another section, so let's see what you have. Let's see. JRPGs that grew without apologizing. So, care to give an example then?
There are some JRPGs out there that didn't grow by negotiating with people who dislike them. They grew by understanding exactly who they were. We don't have to look outside of Square Enix to find a good example of this. We have Team Asano, who developed Octopath Travelers. They created a style with triangle strategy and planted a flag with Octopath Travelers. Octopath didn't modernize turn-based combat by removing any complexities. It didn't streamline itself to feel faster or more cinematic. And it for sure didn't pretend it wasn't a traditional JRPG. Instead, it reframed familiar systems in a way that felt inviting. The boost and break mechanics are immediately readable, and you understand what they do without a tutorial dump. But mastering all of the mechanics still takes time. Octopath doesn't ask you to stop liking JRPGs to enjoy it. It asks you to lean into what makes them great.
Alright, so there's a good example then. So I've heard mixed things about Octopath Traveler as far as the story itself, but I haven't heard too much discussion on the underlying systems regarding it, so I will take you at your word on that.
Octopath shows is that accessibility doesn't have to mean simplification. It can mean clarity, clear systems, clear presentation, clear expectations, and not shielding new players from the genre.
And see, the style debuted in Octopath, not Triangle Strategy. It was the second HD 2-day game. I did wonder about that, because I'd be curious as to where that ended up. It's starting to fall into a lot of the video essay traps. Well, we'll see how much repeating happens in this section, and if it keeps going, we'll move on to the next.
Instead, teach them how to engage with it. Producer Tomoyo Asano explained his philosophy during the Octopath development. He explained that the goal wasn't simplification, but making systems readable enough without stripping depth. Team Asano in the last decade has cornered a whole niche in the market by consistently giving us what works. And after doing that for a few years, they've expanded past Triangle Strategy and Octopath Travelers and into handling the Dragon Quest 1 through 3 HD 2D remakes, and they were greenlit for another new IP, Elliot and the Millennium Tales, where they're going to be attempting to apply their signature look with action-based combat. This is the perfect example of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. A low budget always exceeds expectations because the investment into development is so low. And after working together for so long and repeatedly, they've learned how to deliver more with less.
Alright, so the usual limitation breeds creativity. So another reason why I think the future will be going back to AA in a lot of ways, or at least what we consider AA now, with just a much smaller team, relatively speaking, focused on something very targeted, aiming for a very particular audience, and doing very well in that niche relative to what's put in. So, yep, so nothing too unusual from what we've discussed thus far.
You see something similar with the Tales of series as well. Tales didn't move towards action combat to chase trends. It did it because real-time combat fit what the series already valued and what its foundational elements were with its combat system. Party synergy, constant movement, and moment-to-moment decision-making, and even as the combat evolved, the identity stayed consistent with the entire series. Character-driven stories, long conversations, and systems that reward engagement rather than minimize it. Tales didn't dilute itself to grow. It sharpened what it already was. And even with Tales of Arise modernizing the visuals, it still stuck to the core of the franchise. Now, some of the core
I'd be curious to see some of the gameplay of that, but if we're going to be talking about game mechanics more so than anything else, apologies for my voice continuing to go haywire. Let's see, Tales has always been action combat since 95, so, well, to be fair, even back in the day, JRPGs weren't afraid of real time, even thinking back to stuff like Chrono Trigger, where it was pseudo turn-based, where, oh, you've got the time where you need to think fast with respect to selecting abilities, although still technically turn-based in a manner. So, and you've also got stuff like, well, action RPGs where you have a niche with respect to that.
Fans were slightly upset with the different character model changes, but it didn't alienate them while attempting to attract a new audience. And then there's Persona. Persona absolutely expanded its audience significantly, but it didn't do it by sanding down its edges.
So I'm not sure if Arise is a good argument for some people. Well, is a good argument. Some people absolutely hate its some people hate its battle system. Well, eventually, is that part of the series that you keep trying to get me to play? I'm sure I will encounter it before too long, right?
Expanded its audience significantly, but it didn't do it by sanding down its edges. If anything, it doubled down on its long runtimes, stylized menus, and social systems layered on top of dungeon crawling. Persona didn't become more approachable by becoming less specific. It became more approachable by presenting its identity confidently and consistently. You always know what kind of experience you're signing up for, and when Atlus looked to expand Persona, they did it setting-wise with Metaphor ReFantazio, while maintaining all of the core mechanics that make Persona work.
Wasn't there something about Metaphor ReFantazio having issues earning back its dev costs? Because I think that might have been the impetus for for potentially needing to shake up their formula, unless I'm misremembering.
This worked like a charm, and it's—
No, the series that I want you to play is Trails? How specific?
It's reflected in the sales number, with Metaphor ReFantazio selling 2 million copies as a new IP, and that—
Okay, so wasn't that considered not enough, though? I'm trying to remember.
That number was from 6 months ago. We don't know what the new number is now because they haven't published it yet, but
to be fair, we'll have people who will be able to go in with you do have somewhat of a tail with respect to game purchases because you've got stuff like Steam sales to help you out, but still. I can't remember if the 2 million number was acceptable depending on the dev costs that were thrown into it. So he's not saying that it's a success. I don't know if it's actually a success.
Persona didn't grow by becoming broader, it grew by becoming sharper. Persona producer Katsuda Hashino once said, "We're going back to how we can evolve our JRPGs and what it looks like. Retain our strength, whether that be narrative or elements that make us JRPGs, but update the format that makes the game more widely playable. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is another
Technically not a JRPG made by a French studio, but we'll roll with it.
prime example of the core JRPG formula being executed so well that it transcends to the mainstream audience. Now, what all three of these series share isn't a mechanic or a budget level, it's intent. They don't design themselves around people who might like JRPGs if they changed. They design themselves for people who already do and trust that others will follow if the experience is compelling enough. That's the difference between expansion and insecurity. Expansion says, this is who we are, and here is the best version of it. Insecurity says, this is who we are, unless that's a problem. When a JRPG believes
Alright, so, still... Why does my voice not want to cooperate with me today? How are you all doing? Let's see. I'm not sure what that last message says, Gilgamesh. Well, do you want to try making sure the spelling's correct? Let's see, they're remaking Persona 4, though. Oh, someone else is making it? What? I don't see the purpose in remaking Persona 4, honestly, because the Golden Edition has been out on Steam for how long now? Hang on. You know what? I've got Steam up on my main monitor. I'm curious. How long has Persona 4 been up on Steam? Yes, I can view the page. Oh! Apparently I have volume turned on for this. Okay, whoops. Sorry about the sudden noise. Let's see. Yeah, 2020. Too overwhelmingly positive. Still has de novo on it, damn it. Ugh. Why do you need to remake this, exactly? Actually, when did it originally come out? Hang on. I'm gonna create another Brave tab and check that real quick. Where's new window? When did Persona 4 first release? Back in 2008. Okay, so a long time ago, granted, but if you were able to port it to PC without there being any major concern, is there really a need to remake it? Because with a lot of older games, i.e. before the 2000s, it might make sense to an extent because there would be a decent amount that you could change up from a visual standpoint, since that you aren't facing the same technical limitations as you did back then. But for 4? That seems a bit odd to me. Let's see. So its problem is Final Fantasy. Well, we'll see what happens. So Golden was 2012. Okay, so 8 years later, it's ported to PC, people still love it, and then, well, in spite of de novo, and they still see a need to port. Whatever.
believes in its own identity, accessibility becomes a tool and not a compromise. And that belief changes everything about how a game is designed, marketed, and even remembered. The trouble starts when confidence fades and growth stops being about becoming the best version of yourself and starts being about cross-pollinating genres to go after a wider audience.
Now, the suspicion would be talk about Final Fantasy, especially I think 13 would be the major bugbear there, as well as potentially 7 Remake. I feel like the obvious answer to talk about that would be Forspoken, though.
If you want more JRPG video essays like this one, be sure to like the video and consider subscribing
Doing it in the middle. Well, credit where it's due.
to the channel. But now let's jump
least you
into
didn't
when
throw it at the
expansion
start.
starts to feel like an insecurity. The problem doesn't start just because a JRPG wants to grow. It starts when that growth becomes the primary design goal, because at that point, the game isn't asking itself what kind of experience it wants to be anymore. It's asking what experience won't turn people away. The easiest choice here is Final Fantasy and the years following its transition away from turn-based combat. This isn't about whether those games are good or bad. The issue is the conversation around them. Instead of saying, here's what this Final Fantasy is, the messaging often sounds closer to, don't worry, this one isn't like the other JRPGs, or Final Fantasy doesn't have an identity, it's whatever the lead director wants it to be.
I feel like given the pixel remasters, that doesn't necessarily hold water, but never mind me.
Distinction matters, because it suggests uncertainty about who the game is really for. You can feel that uncertainty in the design itself as well. It's not that these games lack ambition, it feels like they're designed in response to criticism rather than designed in conviction. And that's where the expansion quietly becomes insecurity. The pressure to widen the audience doesn't just change design philosophies, because the moment a JRPG decides it wants to compete with mainstream AAA action games, it has to inherit all of those costs. Yoshida has been unusually transparent about this when discussing Final Fantasy XVI. In interviews, he's openly acknowledged that the shift towards real-time action combat wasn't just creative, it was strategic. This wasn't framed as a creative preference, but more framed as a form of survival.
Well, at that point, why are you still making JRPGs? Wouldn't it make more sense to just shift tack to something radically different, abandon the Final Fantasy name in general? But, well, Final Fantasy XIV is liked. Well, that's a different beast being an MMO, to be fair.
Yoshida said that younger players increasingly don't see appeal in turn-based systems, which influence Final Fantasy XVI's real-time combat.
Hang on, how much did Final Fantasy XVI make? I'm curious. Lifetime sales. Approximately 3.5 million as of mid-2025. Figures include sales from its PS5 launch in 2023 and its PC release in 2024. No interest in turn-based systems? Hang on. You know what? I'm gonna be that guy. Fire Emblem 3 Houses. Sales figures. 4.12 as of December 22. Bear in mind it released in 2019. No interest in turn-based, huh? Granted, again, very different beast, very different circumstance. The reason why people remember Three Houses is not the gameplay, but the story. Well, specifically the characters, but, wanna run that by me again?
Now that decision alone doesn't exist in a vacuum. Once you aim for that broader audience, your competition stops being other JRPGs and starts being the God of Wars, the Crimson Deserts, or the Death Stranding 2s, or just the
I feel like Devil May Cry would be the obvious answer, but never mind me.
much more bigger gaming industry, and that comparison forces escalation. Final Fantasy XVI was built as a full-scale AAA production with global marketing expectations and a category where success requires multi-million sales.
Which means you poured a ton of money into it and did not get the return you needed, as is tradition.
At that scale, success isn't just selling well, it needs to sell exceptionally. And
Yep.
anything short of blockbuster numbers is going to continuously feel like underperformance. Now contrast that.
Well, to be fair, that's been Square Enix's modus operandi for a long time. Back when they had a ton of Western studios for stuff like Tomb Raider and Deus Ex, there were extreme sales expectations where, oh, this sold multi-millions. Not good enough, somehow. Because, well, here we are. Let's see, Final Fantasy XIII is disliked. Very Final Fantasy focused. Well, to be fair, it is the name that people think. Well, I feel like it's the thing that people think of when referring to a JRPG. Most people will think Final Fantasy. I feel like it's not an industry problem, it's Square's problem. Well, Square Enix is a problem, but that's beside the point.
With something like Octopath Travelers, which we spoke about earlier. Square Enix has never released the exact figures, but Octopath Travelers was built with the mid-tier budget and a smaller team and a clearly scoped visual identity. The same thing can be said with Metaphor ReFantasio, which reused proven systems and design philosophies rather than just reinventing the wheel. These games don't sell tens of millions of copies just to justify their existence. They just need to find their audience, and they consistently do. And that difference matters. Because when your budget explodes, your design freedom shrinks significantly. You can't afford to alienate anyone anymore. You can't afford friction for getting into the game. And you for sure can't afford systems to take a lot of time to understand.
Which means you get the typical AAA bloat. Reminds me of the Japan games hated in the mid-2000s. Look up the X-Play videos. Oh, that's a throwback and a half. I didn't keep up with X-Play back in the day, naturally, because I was too young, but I wonder how much of that actually... Well, I wonder how much of that was actually real. Hard to say for certain. Because there would have been somewhat of a stink just from the mainstream conversations, but I wonder how much of that actually mattered in practice, especially since that was still early days in the internet where communication was less, well, I guess, what's the right way to put it? More fragmented, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Every decision becomes defensive, not expressive. Now, it's easy to point the finger at Final Fantasy here, but it's only because it's really the only big franchise that's been active in the last decade. We're still waiting on Dragon Quest XII and Persona 6, but they're playing it safe with remasters and remakes.
That's fair.
Interesting though, is that this approach to widen the audience doesn't actually solve the problem that they're trying to fix. Players who already associate Final Fantasy with JRPGs aren't fooled by the shift to action-based combat. And so those same players who don't like JRPGs still see the brand as niche, and no matter how heavy or action heavy the combat becomes, it's still going to be that niche JRPG. And that makes...
Let's see, to quote Abe Simpson, it was the style at the time. There was an era of gaming media where JRPGs were viewed, for lack of a better word, as cringe. This overlapped with a dark and edgy trend throughout the 7th gen. Pulled that quote from Reddit. Fair enough. So, I guess in that case, I mean, to be fair, some of it would be cringe. I mean, how many times do you have to hear the word darkness in something like Kingdom Hearts? But at the same time, let's see, even a niche turn-based series like Disgaea managed to make 5 million sales worldwide. Yeah, pretty much. So, it's not as if there's no niche to be had. So, I'd be curious to know where the distinction is then.
Makes these games end up feeling stuck in the middle and still struggling to meet expectations. That's the hidden cost of chasing the wrong audience. It doesn't just blur the identity, it raises the bar for success so high that even strong games start to look like failures. Now, what a confident genre actually does is it doesn't chase the audience. They define themselves clearly and let the audience decide whether to meet them there or not. That doesn't mean that they never change though. It means that change comes from intention and not acceptance. When a genre is secure, innovation doesn't look like erasure of the history, it looks like refinement. You can see that in genres that have survived multiple generations without losing their identity, even when the market and player expectations shift. I did dunk on Final Fantasy, but Final Fantasy is still a good, useful example here, not because it's failing, but because it's shown both sides of what it can look like. At its
Okay, so that... I'd be curious to know where you're going with that, because the jump from 6 to 7 was pretty... I'm not going to acknowledge that. So the jump from 6 to 7 was pretty substantial, not just from the... But that also accompanied the shift from 2D to 3D, so having a seismic shift of that scale makes sense to an extent. But I'd be curious to know how much that would necessarily matter, given that technological limitations aren't necessarily a concern anymore, at least not to the same degree.
Best, Final Fantasy didn't succeed by distancing itself away from what it was. It succeeded by fully committing to the vision, even when that vision was risky. Final Fantasy VII didn't soften JRPG conventions to appeal to the West. It leaned into those things and trusted players to engage with it and figure it out. Final Fantasy X didn't chase trends. It refined the structure, the presentation, and emotional pacing while staying unapologetically linear and mechanically dense. Even those games that were divisive at launch were confident in what they wanted to be. They weren't asking for permission. Now contrast that with the moments where evolution feels defensive, where the messaging shifts from "this is our next step" to "don't worry, this one's different." These differences matter because confident genres don't introduce features to justify themselves. They introduce them because they serve the experience to make it better. When confidence is present, accessibility becomes additive and not subtractive.
So, yeah, I guess we're getting to the end. So I guess closing arguments make sense. What else has Chad been up to? Let's see. Another niche series, Wasteland, managed to fund Wasteland 2 and 3 through crowdfunding. Wasteland 3 crowdfunding began in 2016 and concluded a month later with only 3 million raised. Yeah, I did hear about that. That was back when CRPGs were seeing a resurgence. What else is Chad up to? Oh, hey, Your Troopers, how you doing? Yep, I did see the news about Revelation. I will eventually see to it, perhaps, maybe. I just don't know when. And, well, Actually, things should be stable on my end by the time it comes out, although I do have 2 other pieces beforehand before I jump into that. That may end up being something I do on my own, though, depending on what all I have to worry about around then. Let's see, what else is chat up to? Most JRPGs in the 7th gen were handhelds, well, let's see, the 7th gen was the HD jump, and most JRPGs back then were handhelds. Okay, so that would have also affected the perception of them as well, since they would have to be lower res. Let's see.
Tutorials teach without over-explaining. Systems remain complex and layered, and they're not flattened. And complexity is optional, not removed. The genre assumes that the player is curious and not fragile, and they're just gonna put the game down if one thing goes wrong. This is what a confident genre understands. You don't grow by apologizing for what you are, you grow by learning to articulate it better. The most successful genre expansions don't come from removing that friction, it comes from reframing it. From players understanding why something is rewarding rather than sending it down until it becomes unrecognizable.
Alrighty then, so, yep, continuing to wrap things up. Alright, so, doesn't look like I have much more to say on this given how much repetition there was in this video, so we'll go ahead and let the rest play out and then we'll call it.
JRPGs don't need to stop evolving. They need to stop negotiating with an audience that hasn't asked them to. Because players who fall in love with the genre don't do it despite its identity, they do it because of it. Masahiro Sakurai articulated this idea perfectly. Japanese game lovers overseas are not looking for Americanized products. They want something unique and interesting from Japan.
Yep, and that is held true. Good of him to say that explicitly, as that has been the main contention for a long time, where, hey, you don't need to change, just keep being you. If I'm getting something like Fire Emblem, I want Fire Emblem, not whatever whatever a localization team thinks Fire Emblem should be. Although, more on that when I can finally finish the Engage video. So, and honestly, there are critiques that you can make of Fire Emblem. If I have such a problem, I'll make my own. And I am working on that.
And the moment that JRPGs remember that, the moment they stop chasing the wrong audience, is the moment that the genre starts moving forward again with confidence instead of hesitation. JRPGs aren't in a state of decline, they're in a moment of hesitation while they figure it out. A moment where the genre knows it has something special, but isn't sure how boldly it is allowed to stand by that special. The truth is, the audience JRPGs are searching for already exists. There are players who want long stories, they crave complex systems, and the game trusts them to stay and play no matter how long it takes them to get there. JRPGs don't need permission to exist. They need the confidence to commit. If you enjoy JRPG video essays like this one,
alright, so we'll go ahead and leave that there. Okay, so that was Tag the Legend apparently. There we are. So, a lot of repetition in that video. Could have been filed down to be, probably could have filed it down 2 to 5 minutes. But, well, by 2 to 5 minutes, let me put it that way. But still, bringing up a point that does need to be stated. So, no complaints here, I suppose. Anything I need to see to with respect to chat? I feel like it is moving forward, just not Final Fantasy. I feel the problem is more Square Enix. Yep, okay. So, I get his idea, but I disagree with his arguments. Fair enough. Alrighty. So, now that we've seen to that, now comes the really interesting one for me anyway, because, let's see, when was this posted to Discord? It's been a while, I think. Ah, here it is. So, it was posted almost a month ago at this point. Let's see. Hang on, is there something that just showed up? I feel the argument falls flat when you look at the JRPGs that are not Final Fantasy. I'd need to go digging through the sales figures and how they've been received from a critical and commercial sense, but either way, we can mull over that another time. If you have any other examples you want to bring up, feel free to throw them into Discord. I'd be very curious to see another perspective on this. Still, either way, with that in mind, let's go ahead and move to the next topic. So, if you'll recall, the most popular video on this channel was going over Frieren Beyond Journey's End, Specifically, it was a video response to someone who was saying, hey, I don't like how the demons are portrayed in the show. So, I was presented this a little under a month ago, saying, hey, found this intriguing because it doesn't discuss the morality of the demons in the anime. It purely talks about how they're written. Which, already, you're speaking my language, because that was the main contention I had with the video we had looked at before, because it had been, I think, about 40 minutes or so of trying to make internal consistency arguments and giving an introduction as to why you would be interested in discussing it. But then, with it, the following 6 minutes were mostly meta discussions saying, hey, here's this aspect, that here's what I wanted it to be, where it starts to look like, okay, are you just a culture critic then? Is that the reason why you've made these factual inaccuracies with the critiques you've made? So, because of that, that video ended up not the prior video we had talked about ended up not being all that good. But this one comes along a few months ago apparently, and the question is, if this is focused purely on writing, is there a legitimate internal consistency issue that can be pointed to and is worth discussing? So, let's find out.
Hello and hey, this is Zero Goken Reviews, and I'm Zero Goken, but you can just
Alright, the voice is gonna bother me, but we'll go ahead with that.
call me Goken. Before we start, it's entirely possible that I just missed something, or have something completely backwards. You'll have to hear me out to find out, I guess. Today, I'm going to be talking about something that has been living rent-free in my mind for fucking hell.
Alright, I don't know if you necessarily need to do all this given that it's only 8 minutes, but carry on.
Over a year. That something is the demons in Frieren.
This is starting very similar to the Lexdorius video, please keep going.
Don't worry, this has nothing to do with morality. How am I
Okay, thank you. Please get to it then.
supposed to moralize over something that in my perspective is nonsense? Regardless, if you haven't seen it, the main thing to note is that the demons in Frieren are not like people. They're essentially monsters, or I guess animals, that are capable of using mimicry to come off as sapient beings.
Yes, but have a completely different moral code as a result of the fact that they have been relying on mimicry, yes. What's the problem?
Mainly as a way of preying on the actually sapient beings, which in this case are humans, elves, and dwarves. Or at least that's how I interpret.
Well, wait, hang on. That guy isn't a dwarf, That guy isn't a dwarf, he's just a short human. What are you doing? Eisen was right there. Why did you pick him?
It. A problem I've seen some people have with this is that it's sort of racism coded. We could talk a long time about this, but as a racist myself, I don't
Okay, calm down.
really care about that. My main problem is just, does it make sense? I did check the wiki to make sure my interpretation was correct, which I think the very fact it says that they don't understand what words even mean means I'm probably not entirely wrong.
I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that stance, because the way I would describe it is that there are certain concepts and emotion that they don't understand, and certain emotions that they simply cannot experience. It'd be like someone trying to describe the color red or green if you have red-green color blindness. It would just look the same to you. So, it's just not a dimension that you can operate in. So, the fact that demons are able to communicate with each other using human language, they just don't have a concept of something like a father, isn't necessarily a distinction. Well, isn't necessarily a problem so long as they're able to understand, hey, I can exploit this word even if I don't understand what you're referring to.
Although half the time I just gawked at pictures of Aura. She's
of course
fucking sexy. Although my gawk session was interrupted by the thought, wait a minute, does she even pass the Harkness test?
What's the Harkness test?
Can she consent? Does she even know what
Where are you going with this? What the hell did you send me?
that is. If they're basically animals, then I guess not. But that's the question, isn't it?
Why is that your first thought? You know what, never mind.
Are they basically animals? I will admit, I'm not a Frieren expert. I haven't even read the manga. But even if the demons do make sense, I think at least the anime, if not also the manga, does a poor job of setting them up.
How?
Sometime after being introduced, the demons are expanded on by having Frieren, in other words an in-universe character, give an explanation along with an anecdote of a personal experience. And I'm sorry Frieren, but having lived in the real world, I don't just believe people when they say things. Even fictional people who are main characters in stories. If you've ever read The Witcher, you'd know that Geralt sometimes says that he's essentially devoid of emotion because the Witcher trials stripped him of them.
Yes, characters can lie. Does Frieren have reason to lie in the circumstance that you're discussing this? Frieren definitely has a perspective on the world. In fact, actually, I can pull up something from a video on, well, the video essay that I keep saying I'll do eventually. So, because I end up talking about Frieren again. Let's see, where is it? So, while Frieren here's what I've got written. While Frieren may not be an emotionless arbiter on the matter due to her own hatred of demons, that doesn't overwrite the core message, it just makes her more eager to carry it out. So, namely, exterminate the demons, they cannot coexist with us, that whole bit. So, is Frieren actually lying here? Yes, you may not necessarily take someone at face value IRL. But this is also a story. We're not operating necessarily by the same logic. Does Frieren have reason to lie? Because, and in the example you brought up, would Geralt have reason to lie? Depending on who he said that to, potentially. I don't know the context as to why he said that. So, Frieren in that moment, trying to explain to her students why exactly she doesn't trust demons, we have no reason to believe that she is lying in that moment.
Or something. We, the readers, know this is just not fucking true. Geralt is either lying, or he believes something that isn't true about himself, and possibly it's a little bit of both. This is why I don't just believe Frieren when she says this.
But this isn't that context. We have no reason to believe that she is lying. Or that she is misinterpreting, because she's been alive longer than literally every other character we've met so far, outside, well, up to that point in the manga, or anime, I suppose.
People can be lying, misinformed, or biased.
Biased I will grant you for Frieren, but, I mean, she's had plenty of time to try and disabuse that notion, and hasn't found an example yet, so,
That, and more importantly, my willingness to take her at face value is clouded by my hatred for her entire fucking race.
Okay, calm down. Okay, yeah, you're not being objective here. Come on, calm down.
With that being said, am I just racist against her, or is there more to this?
I have a particular direction that I'm leaning in.
Completely disregard what she said.
Hello, Code Error. How are you doing?
I reluctantly heard her out, but I would need to see how the demons actually are in order to believe her, which might be a bit difficult, since some posts I've read say they're so well written that they've managed to not just deceive in-universe characters, but also some readers into thinking the demons are people. So,
I mean, do I point to my own video response on that count? I mean, that is the joke. I think the most popular comment on that video... Hang on, I'm gonna go dig that up real quick. Hold up, where is it? I literally just have to click on any one of my notifications for the Unscripted channel. Yes, here it is. The literal most popular comment on that video. That's so stupid. No human will fall for these demon deceptions. The humans. Talking about the video. So, that's him, the one who's going to get his entire village killed. Yeah, that is the big joke. Because there are people who didn't get it. So, not unwarranted.
is this true? Well, The very first clip I watched to make sure of this basically completely disproved this to me. I can only really show you this in
a
limited fashion, but what's happening in this scene...
Okay, you know what? Let's make sure that I've got an understanding of this. Okay, so they're talking about deception. So let me make sure I got the context of that before I start skewering him.
I've read say they're so well written that they've managed to not just deceive in-universe characters, but also some readers into thinking the demons are people. So is this true? Well, the very first clip I watched to make sure of this basically...
Wait, hang on. You chose when they're already in combat? Against someone who knows what to look for and knows not to trust them. Is this really the clip to use as your evidence? When Fern, trained by Frieren to be incredibly hostile towards humans, given a fighting style that is incredibly effective against almost any mage of this era, according to Frieren, which turns out to be pretty freaking accurate based on what we see here and at the trial, well, to become a first-class mage. This is your example?
Completely disproved this to me. I can only really show you this in a limited fashion, but what's happening in this scene is that we're hearing the inner monologue, basically the thoughts of the demon, Lugner, during his fight with main character Fern, who despite her perceived complete magical inferiority to the demon, is overwhelming him.
But here's the thing, the demon's being deceived as well, because Fern is actually more powerful than she appears, and as a result, this is a misunderstanding on the demon's part. So, what's your point?
Do you see the problem already?
No.
Why would he ever do this? As in think, in words.
Why wouldn't he?
Animals.
If an animal has a similar intellectual capability as a human, is an internal monologue really that much of a stretch?
Do in fact think, but having complex verbal thoughts is something unique to humans,
But if you're able to mimic human speech, and clearly understand enough of it to where you can interact with each other and ask questions like, what is a father, even if you don't know every single word, is that such a stretch?
Or sapient life forms. This is one of the main things that separates humans from animals, and demons supposedly can only use words. They don't understand their meaning.
They understand the meanings of some of them. They understand the meaning enough to know how to communicate with each other using words. Between each other, it boils down to me stronger, you weaker, you listen to me, but the point stands, they are able to speak with each other. So they understand enough on that count. I don't see the disconnect here.
If he doesn't understand what words even mean, then why are his thoughts verbal, and not some other form of thinking?
And who's to say that isn't a conceit for the audience so that we can understand what he's thinking?
Imagine trying to think in a language you don't understand. Like, that doesn't even make sense. Which is my point exactly. Maybe this is just supposed to be a translation of his non-verbal thoughts for exposition.
Okay, cool, you're addressing that.
Purposes. Just like how the characters are for some reason speaking in Japanese. But I don't quite buy that. And regardless.
And why not? Are you going to give a reason for why?
I feel like humanizing them this way, even for exposition, goes against the whole point of the demons.
No, that is the point, because hey, here's this internal monologue, they even have this. They just have these other, they just have these other parts that are so fundamentally different from us that we still can't coexist, even if they've been able to mimic us to this much of a degree. I don't see the problem here.
It's just really strange, the dissonance in engaging in conversation with things that you know are literally monsters that don't even understand the words they're saying.
But is that actually... Yeah, I don't agree with the underlying premise, and you're just going to keep repeating this, aren't you?
Why engage with them at all?
Well, I mean, that is the point. You don't engage with them, you just kill them. That's Frieren's approach.
Just gun them down on sight. Like, legit. What the...
That's what Frieren does.
What the fuck are you doing?
Because Frieren knows she has this demon's number. Why would she care? At this point, it's well, to be fair, you could argue that Frieren should be just going, okay, yeah, this is pointless, I'm not going to talk with you. No, die. Unless perhaps there is a sense of, well, to be fair, we learn later in this that there are demons who have tried to coexist, and perhaps there may be a shred where, there may be a shred of hope from Frieren that, hey, perhaps I will meet the one that actually is different, but she's seen enough to know, okay, yep, this ain't the one, kill. And to be fair, in circumstances like this, definitely should not be interacting with Aura. She knows how Aura is. Just take her out. Oh, hang on a sec. Sorry, boys, I need to see to something real quick. Be right back. Okay, sorry about that, boys. But back to it.
So, what do you think? Am I off base?
Yes.
Am I just running on misremembered information from when I watched Frieren on my fucking phone a year ago?
Why are you making this video if you are working on incomplete information?
Fact-checked by reading a potentially incorrect wiki. And does the demons thinking verbally make sense considering what they're supposed to be? I would actually like to hear an explanation to this, because I can't think of one. One you might come up with is that they're like contemporary so-called AI.
No, I would not use that argument. What's chat been up to? I feel the demons would not get videos like this if the demons did not look like humans. If they look like eldritch abominations, people would not make this argument. That's as in the point of this scene to have okay, and presumably, oh, I see. That's the argument as to why she's why Frieren is verbally engaging with Aura. Right, because Frieren's objective is not just gross overpowering because she's got the whole army she would have to barrel through. Rather, compel Aura to get out the scales and then, you should kill yourself now. So, okay, you know what? Fair enough. I should have remembered that. You got me there, chat.
The AI uses words without knowing the meaning behind the words.
Yes, because that's a machine, not a living being.
I would actually like this as an explanation, since that would mean that Frieren fucking hates AI. With that being said,
why are you like this?
Intelligence in AI is entirely artificial. There's no real thinking involved. Computers compute. They don't think. This would not explain why the demon is thinking in words.
There's an entire section of the manga where we talk about demons and how they research magic. Your argument is invalid.
Another possibility is that I'm completely wrong.
Yes.
And the demons are a fully sapient race. That is just pure evil because they don't have any of the positive emotions.
No, they're monsters that have a very similar intellectual capability to humans. That lets them come close, but there are fundamental differences.
Which, if that's the case, why even include the line about them not knowing the meaning of words? I checked the other videos on this subject and scrolled through the comments. It seems most people think the demons are just beasts, so if they are in fact supposed to actually be sapient, or I guess Homo sapient, since some interpretation of the meaning of the word includes the ability to feel certain feelings that demons do not feel. So if they're supposed to be semi or fully sapient, I'm pretty sure most people had the incorrect interpretation as well. To be extra sure, I did go and read about the manga, and unlike the wiki, the manga says the reason they speak the human language is not to communicate, but rather it's only to deceive.
Yes. Well, I had to deal with this argument from Lextorius as well, where, why would they be speaking to each other in a human language? And my answer then was, is it really so difficult to understand that, hey, if we have this tool that's useful for communicating with humans that we all understand, why wouldn't we use it outside of that context? So, it is not a difficult extrapolation to make.
Then you read more of the manga or watch more of the anime and see scenes like this, where they're clearly just communication.
Well, chat already answered that for me. It's a matter of Frieren luring Aura into a trap.
Inappropriate Gundam reference. Like, look at this.
Okay.
Frieren says, "Long time no see," and Aura responds with, "It's been 80 years. Was it not 80
It's been 3,000 years! Sorry, I had to do it.
years? Was that a lie?" You could argue that the very act of speaking to you is a form of deception by demons, since that somewhat makes them appear more human.
Yes?
But then why would they speak to each other? Like in
Because if you already have this, why not use it?
this scene, where Lugner is just explaining what demons are to the other demons, which in its
If cats could communicate to us with us using English or what any other human language, what's stopping them from using it to communicate with each other? It ain't that deep.
itself is also very strange. In conclusion, I don't know. That's about it. Thank you for watching.
Let's just move on. Okay, so, yes, note to self, do not make video on topic that you are only half informed on, even if you joke about being half informed on it. Come on. Well, that was technically better, because it was shorter, and it didn't invoke culture war bullshit, but, not a high bar. Alrighty, that's enough of that. So, what time is it? Oh, perfect. Okay then. I think we've got time for, let's see, what do we have time for? If this guy managed to trick Aura like Frieren did, he would have given her a very different command. If you think this joke is bad, just remember there are probably people who think it would be less evil than what Frieren did. To be fair, the whole reason that Lextorius made his video is because someone said, hang on, you could compel Aura to do all sorts of stuff, and then you just decide to kill her. Which, to be fair, someone then pointed in the comments on my response video of, yep, okay, yeah, so the answer is instead of instead of killing Aura, we're just gonna resort to slavery instead. So, oh man. I wish I had thought about that for my video, but never mind that. Either way, enough of that. So, let's do something a little lighter. Hopefully. So, the biggest cancelled games of the 90s, this was something recommended by Gilgamesh. So, don't know too much about what to expect from this. Did you know gaming does good work from what I recall, though it's been a while since I've seen anything from him. I guess we'll just have to see. Anything else I need to worry about from chat? Reminds me of arguments with the goblins and Goblin Slayer. Yep, that was another one where, yep, this horrible thing happened, and then the knight in that goes, well, okay, all of you are gonna die now. And to be fair, from his perspective, I mean, if something terrible had happened, yeah, I would want vengeance too, to an extent. So, if this is, especially if it's been a consistent problem, though I don't know all of the world building with respect to Goblin Slayer, I only know of the reputation. Either way, so. The littlest would be the Pikmin video. I'm assuming that you mean the last video. Well, we'll see if we have time for it after this. We'll see if I have enough to say on it, more to the point. Either way, let's go ahead and jump into this. Alrighty,
The
as per
90s was a
usual.
golden age of gaming, a simpler time. But for the people making those games, it was far from simple. The transition to 3D was uncharted territory, studios were rampant with office politics, and as a result, a lot of projects never crossed the finish line. So today we're going to take a look at what these cancelled games were, and also why they died, if they would have been any good, and the lengths fans have gone to find what's left of them. From a Half-Life getting scrapped because one executive was high maintenance, a civil war between Mega Man fans costing them a priceless auction, to Sega losing out on a literal $1 trillion. These are the biggest lost games of the 90s.
No one has names in Goblin Slayer? Wait, really? Huh. That can't be right. Wait, hang on. I'll need to go fact check that later. Okay, that's an introduction and a half. What's this?
What do you mean you couldn't catch him?
Guy's fast as lightning, boss. He just disappeared in the blue streak.
Ah.
I'm telling you, he's bigger and badder than before.
Interesting. So is that a commercial then? For what that game would have been? Hang on, is there anything? Hang on, looks like there's someone I need to see to in chat real quick. I personally think Frieren should have kept not only Aura alive, but her minions as well, and forced them to work on a farm. Well, the argument I'd make against that is that it may be, since that it's been proven that Aura has broken out, well, that someone can break out of Aura's spell, that would be a risk that I don't think Frieren would want to take. Either way. She also should have been given a white hood that would go great. Hang on. I need to read your comments before I say them out loud. Oh boy. Although I guess it depends on the kind of hood. If it's just a hooded jacket, it might be fine, but let's just move on.
Sega.
Well then.
Generally considered the best game on the Genesis, Sonic 2 was developed by Sega Technical Institute, a California super studio that combined the talents of Japanese and US devs under one roof. But cultural differences mounted, and long story short, the two sides broke up as soon as it was finished. After making a few games separately, the Japanese flew home to make Nights into Dreams, which would end up a critical and commercial success. Meanwhile, the Americans were tasked with developing the first 3D Sonic game, and it was one of the most hellish experiences you could ever imagine. Sonic X-treme was originally supposed to be a 1994 launch title for 32X, but they missed the deadline, and the 32X flopped anyway, so development shifted to the Sega Saturn. This was around the time PlayStation launched, and its success got Sega executives finger-pointing and infighting. At one point...
yeah, there would have been a lot of tension, especially when Sega was still making consoles. Oh boy. Especially with, I think this was when PlayStation was up and coming.
Sega of America made a cartridge-based console they called a Saturn Killer, which is wild to think about. Just imagine Nintendo of America trying to make an N64 killer. But anyway, Extreme's development was now moved on to that system. But when they plugged in the system prototype, it wouldn't even start, so they scrapped it and moved back to the Saturn. And all of this back and forth was just a waste of time they could not afford, because now they had a hard deadline of Christmas 1996. Not only were they constantly changing platforms, but also game engines, meaning a lot of work had to start
So, good old-fashioned development hell, eh?
over from scratch. To make matters worse, the team was deeply understaffed, and people kept rage quitting from poor working conditions. Eventually, they went to management and said, "Get rid of the political crap, isolate a core team, and give us the tools necessary to get the job done." After that, 10 devs moved into an empty office building and worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I mean, I've heard of crunch, but damn.
As for the game itself, it took a lot of forms over 2 years of development hell, but at this point the focus was speed, exploration, and secret areas. Unfortunately, going fast meant falling into pits and hitting walls when they suddenly would come on screen, so devs had to widen the view with a fisheye lens. As for the game's story, Sonic would collect 6 rings of power and take down Dr. Robotnik, with help from new characters like Tiara Bubowski. Sonic X-treme was announced at E3 1996 to thunderous applause. A playable demo was erected at the front of Sega's booth, and magazines predicted an epic showdown with Mario 64 later that year. Management threw a party, with the Hedgehog himself handing out Sonic tattoos, and Sega of America's president proclaiming Saturn would win the console war come Christmas time.
And this is where the narrator cuts in, and no, that did not happen.
And they even showed the trailer that you saw earlier, where Mario's really a
Wait, that was real? Eh? That was real. Okay then.
Afraid of Sonic. Despite their bravado and the press's initial enthusiasm, people quickly caught onto a lot of Extreme's problems. The fisheye lens was disorienting, levels were empty, and it just looked a bit jank. Meanwhile, the devs were working themselves sick. Programmer Christina Coffin came down with walking pneumonia and had to bow out. Designer Chris Sen lost
hang on. How?
25 pounds and was told that he had 6 months to live. But finishing Extreme was impossible without them, so that was the last straw, and the game was cancelled a few months before Christmas. There was even going to be a theatrical movie tie-in, but that got cancelled as well.
Wait, hang on, they were thinking that for— oh wow, jeez.
It was too late to stop all of the merchandise from reaching the store shelves though, and promos were glued onto ice cream trucks for over a decade. Sonic Extreme has lived on in legend ever since as the most famous cancelled Sonic game. So, would it have been any good? Builds have leaked over the years, but even if it was finished, it probably wouldn't have rivaled Mario. But
yeah, probably not, given the circumstances.
Who knows? Maybe in an alternate reality where the team were allowed to do their jobs, it could have been something special. Chris Sen survived his 6-month diagnosis and put it more succinctly than we can. Quote, Sonic Extreme underwent many changes and difficulties that would have tested even the most seasoned game industry veterans.
That is putting it very politely by the sounds of it, if you were given a prognosis like that.
Of experience, poor business decisions, ego, politics, overambition, bad timing, and poor communication, which ultimately spelled disaster for the game. And here's the tragic cherry on top. Remember the Saturn killer? Sega gave Nvidia $5 million to make it, and by all rights, should have gotten their money back when it didn't work. But Nvidia's president asked if he could keep the money, and in exchange, give Sega part ownership of his company. Sega took the deal, and then cashed out a few years later at a decent profit.
What?
But
why would you cash out on something like that? Especially, well, to be fair, it's not as if you could anticipate the current scenario, but still. You'd think that a major manufacturer would be worth having at least a minor investment in. What were you dealing with? You know what? Sega's business in general is confusing half the time.
If they didn't cash out, they would have enough money to buy out Nintendo and Sony. That guy's still president today, actually.
If he would have kept that the investment, I think it'd be worth probably about $1 trillion today.
Nowadays, they're the most valuable company in the world, and Nvidia chips power Nintendo consoles today. Ouch.
Ouch indeed. What the hell is this?
That is Mario 128, a completely different project.
What the hell is this?
From 64's direct sequel. Miyamoto called both of them Mario 128, which caused a lot of confusion. But sometimes he called the sequel Mario 64 too, and that's the game we're going to talk about. Around the same time Sonic Extreme was getting cancelled, the Plumber's Jump to 3D was hitting store shelves and winning awards everywhere. Miyamoto wanted to make a quick follow-up as the final game that he would direct personally. Quote, I couldn't put everything into Super Mario 64 that I really wanted, so we've decided to continue working toward a sequel which will take about a year and a half at least.
Back when games actually came out at a relatively fast clip.
Mario 64 only used about 60% of the Nintendo 64's power.
Obligatory look what they need to mimic a fraction of our power joke.
There's a lot more we could have done, but we ran out of time and cartridge space, so we're gonna do those things in the next one. Luigi got cut from the original, and bringing him back was a core focus for this sequel. Not for
Makes
multiplayer
sense.
though. Instead, it would be more like Resident Evil 0, where one player controls both characters using their skill sets and solving puzzles. Except for a post-game cameo, Yoshi also got cut from the first game, and Japanese magazines reported that he would return in a more prominent role, though Miyamoto never confirmed that detail. I'm changing the gameplay system, adding more enemies and retooling the display and graphics, he teased. Last time, I only designed for—
Let's see. And then he would also show up in Mario Galaxy. Well, eventually, yeah. Let's see, 90s Sega was a fight between Japan and US. Yeah, pretty much. Some Mario 128 tech was used in Pikmin. Oh, interesting. And Mario Galaxy. Huh. I guess I could see that given the circumstance. Is that why Miyamoto was so attached to Pikmin?
for a cartridge, but next time I would take advantage of the potential of the 64DD. I plan to utilize the 64DD's read and write functions to create a new type of game. In
Read and
1998,
write.
he said the sequel was half finished, and a prototype with Mario and Luigi running around was sitting on his desk, but he was too busy with Zelda to make time for it. Ocarina was massively delayed, but he promised as soon as it was finished, he'd turn attention back to Mario. In the meantime, his team was experimenting with 4-player split screen, and insiders reported the other 2 characters were Peach and Toad, just as they had been in Super Mario Bros. 2. But it was a chaotic time for Nintendo, with the 64DD getting repeatedly delayed before ultimately flopping. Satellaview and the Nintendo Power System were sucking up resources as well, and then they flopped too. Virtual Boy, Game Boy, the mobile system GB, Nintendo just had too many irons in the fire. Miyamoto was overloaded too, producing a dozen games at once and having to move developers back and forth between them like a game of whack-a-mole. A lot of them got delayed, while others never came out at all. 64-2's cancellation was never formally announced, but it faded around the same time Mario 128 got revealed. It kinda had the same name, so a lot of people thought it was just the same game. Miyamoto teased it might be a GameCube pack-in title, but that didn't end up happening either. The press kept hounding him for updates until he finally put the questions to rest in 2007 with this explanation.
When people ask me what happened to Mario 128, I'm always at a loss as to how to answer. Because actually most of you have already played it. But you played it in a game called Pikmin.
Ah. Okay, so a lot of the concepts got retooled into something very different. Again, probably why he's so attached to it.
Basically, he said Mario 128's 100 on-screen characters became Pikmin, and its spherical stage turned into Mario Galaxy's planets. No one asked him for updates ever again, but he was talking about 128, not 64-2. Those questions were never answered. Maybe some ideas made it into 64DS or 3.
Well, either way, that would at least get enough of the heat off of you back in the day to where people would say, hey, here's the best answer you're gonna get, now leave me alone.
3D world, but who knows? Maybe it didn't become much of anything. It's really hard to say for certain, since no footage or screenshots were ever made public. Obviously it would have been good, and fans hope that someday that a half-finished prototype from Miyamoto's desk may leak online. But if it hasn't by now, after 25 years and all of the Giga leaks, it probably never will.
When was the last major leak of Nintendo proper? I know there was the Terra leak for Pokemon a while back, but it doesn't feel like Nintendo proper has had anything major outside of just, hey, we've got game announcement coming up. But outside of that, can't think of too much that's been announced or talked about with respect to that. Mega Man, I assume?
In 1993, Capcom took Mega Man's gameplay, mixed in a little Metroid, and introduced a new protagonist set in a dark future, resulting in Mega Man X, often considered one of the best Super Nintendo games ever made. After a couple of direct sequels, Capcom started working on a spin-off that would never see the light of day. No one knew it existed until 2018, when franchise archivist Proto-Dude found design documents on Yahoo Auctions Japan with an opening bid of $1,000.
Interesting. The last major Nintendo Mega Leak was 2020? When was that? I'm trying to remember what exactly was included in that. Oh, the Giga Leak, that's what you're referring to. Fair enough.
Bid on the proto carts before, but this was for a game that no one had even heard of. Translating the auction photos revealed the title as Mega Man X Interactive. It was dated 1995 to 96, starred classic characters and new ones, and had hours of cutscenes, interspersed with gameplay and dialogue options that send you down branching paths. In the 90s, people would have called it an interactive movie game, hence the game's title. Proto-Dude asked fans to pull resources so he could buy the full 11 pages, have them translated, and donated to the Video Game History Foundation. They raised over 10 grand in a day, and Proto-Dude placed his bid.
Unfortunately, because I made that public, someone pretty high up in the Japanese Mega Man community saw it. So they reported the auction, and it had an hour to go, still no bids, and within that hour, it was pulled. It was gone, completely gone.
Yeah, because that is still their IP, so Capcom probably made the call and said, oi, mine.
Japanese fans applauded the takedown. They believed making the documents public would be disrespectful to Capcom, and suspected that they might have been stolen. Maybe from the dumpster behind Capcom's office, or an external storage unit, or a developer swiped it themselves.
Yeah, any number of possibilities for how it could have ended up in their hands, so in a strange sense, given how litigious Japanese game devs can be, given how protective, I guess, they can be, to put it in a nicer manner, that might have saved that guy a messy lawsuit given the circumstances.
Proto-Dude thinks they weren't stolen, and the seller might have just been a developer's relative, because they were also selling jewelry and antiques. It's possible that this stuff was their inheritance. He told us that once a year he continues reaching out to try and make a deal in private, but to no avail. This whole debacle caused a breakup between Western and Japanese Mega Man fans, and to this day, you can find them on Yahoo auctions, bidding against each other. If the West wins, they dump it online. If Japan wins, they stick it in a private collection.
There is a bit of a cultural difference in terms of, it belongs in a museum versus it belongs with the right holder. So that schism still very much exists.
Well, that's just the difference between the US and Japan in general. It's funny, a while back, let's see, for whatever reason, the main social media that you'll see Japan use is Twitter. And I think a few months ago, there was this weird phenomenon where you had the US and Japanese Twitter feeds just merged together to an extent where you'd have a bunch of Americans and Japanese people just asking each other questions, geeking out about particular things, and honestly, it was the most wholesome thing I've ever seen on Twitter. But the one genuine disagreement I've ever seen since then is with respect to copyright and game preservation. For whatever reason, the Japanese perspective is radically different from how the West sees it, and it is quite the minefield if you're willing to go and dig up all those conversations. My God.
Proto-Dude talked to a Capcom dev who confirmed Interactive was real, but couldn't remember why it was cancelled. They also said it influenced the development of Super Adventure Mega Man, a movie game that released in Japan a couple of years later for PlayStation and Saturn. Interactive was presumably meant for those systems as well, since hours of cutscenes weren't possible on cartridge consoles. So, would Mega Man X Interactive have been any good? It's hard to say, but Famitsu reviewed Super Adventure 7 out of 10, with praise for its animation and voice acting, but points off for plot and limited gameplay. Interactive likely would have been similar, a decent game for its time, but not a masterpiece. For modern fans, the real draw is the characters and lore it would have added to the franchise. Hopefully, it'll resurface someday.
Let's see, it reminds me of the piracy arguments. I sent a video about that. I'm trying to remember when that was, because it would have been a while ago given the circumstances. Unless it's in my backlog and we just haven't seen it yet. Hang on. When was the last time? Is it buried within... I don't see it in the list of stuff I have from you, so... I'll have to go digging on that for a while. Either way. What this? Castlevania, presumably? Early 3D, huh? Yep.
Look at any NES Top 100 list and you'll find the Castlevania trilogy all near the top. The same goes for the sequels on Super Nintendo, Genesis, and PlayStation. So people were excited in 1998 when they heard rumors of Castlevania 3D coming to Dreamcast. But the hype cooled when they learned that Konami Japan wasn't making it. Instead, it was Konami of America, whose recent titles reviewed in the 7s. Even more concerning was the anonymous insiders, who trashed the project and called it Cancelvania, implying that it was a train wreck that would never come out. But Konami shut them up, and showed up to the next E3 with an impressive demo. Now titled Castlevania Resurrection, fans were relieved to learn its director was Norio Takamoto, a designer on the excellent Castlevania Bloodlines, who worshipped Symphony of the Night. He was axing Castlevania 64's puzzles and fetch quests and going back to what made the series great to begin with, jump and whipping action.
So, what happened?
He told reporters, think of it as a 3D version of the very first Castlevania. Instead of wandering around courtyards, you'd be whipping your way through 50 linear stages. The story was set in 1666, with Victor and Sonia Belmont as its two playable characters. It would run at 60 frames per second, and the music was ambient and gothic, just as it should be. Outlets got a 25% complete build later that year, with GameSpot saying after the disappointment of Castlevania 64, this could be the series' true transition to 3D.
So, what happened?
IGN loved what they played and called it incredible, with potential to be the series' own Super Mario 64. They had concerns about the camera, but the game was still far
Well, I mean, camera problems with early 3D, that's just, well, name a more iconic duo.
from complete, so hopefully the wrinkles would get ironed out before launch. Unfortunately though, Dreamcasts weren't exactly flying off of the shelves.
Nope.
So the day that Sony revealed the PS2's launch date, Konami cancelled all of their Dreamcast projects, including Resurrection. Its memory lived on for decades, with fans obsessing and documenting every detail. It was the one that got away, their own Ura Zelda. Until, in 2021, a burner account posted video of a long-lost disc and threw it up on eBay. Bids shot past 20 grand.
Jeez.
As fans worried it would fall into the hands of a hoarder. But then, just like with Mega Man Interactive,
It got snatched up and taken down.
the auction disappeared. Fortunately, there was a happy ending this time, as Dreamcast preservationist Komi Laron managed to acquire it from the seller and dump it online. Fans made box art that you can print yourself, so you can add Resurrection to your shelf, play it on original hardware, or just run an emulator. We talked to Komi for some previously unknown behind the scenes. Long story short, he was in contact with the seller, who's a die-hard Castlevania collector, before it went public, and Komi offered as much as he could. It was a modest sum compared to its worth though, so the collector decided to sell it on eBay for a higher price, while promising Komi the ROM for preservation's sake.
Okay, so... not the worst compromise, I suppose.
But his auction got flooded with fake bids and nasty messages from die-hard fans, so he cancelled it, had a laugh about it with Komi, and sold it to him for his original modest offer.
Fair
A
enough.
bunch of YouTubers ran the story with half the details wrong, didn't credit Komi, and some amateur sites falsely took the credit for the dump. It was a bad time all around, but he did get the disc. So, was it any good? Honestly, it's pretty rough. A lot of fans were disappointed, but to be clear, this was the E3 build, which was really more of a tech demo. The camera is bad and the levels
Wait, how are you standing on lava?
are unfinished, because at this early stage, the main purpose was to look good in magazine screenshots. Development continued for another 10 months after that, but so far, those later builds still haven't been found. Resurrection devs would later claim the early rumors about Castlevania being garbage came from insiders with an agenda. Believe whoever you want, but I think it's fair to say that it definitely had a chance at being great. For whatever it's worth, the next Castlevania game reviewed 8 out of 10. It was made by a different studio in Japan though, as the Resurrection team disbanded after it got cancelled.
That's always rough. What sort of cancelled Zelda are we gonna be witness to?
Probably the 90s most famous cancelled game, Ura Zelda was a 64 disc drive expansion to Ocarina of Time that promised new areas, dungeons, minigames, and even more. Miyamoto likened it to Zelda 1's New Game Plus, which boasted higher difficulty with a remixed heart container, shop, item, dungeon locations, and so on. Zelda 1's New Game Plus doesn't have an in-game title. Western fans call it Second Quest, but in Japan it's often referred to as Ura Zelda, which translates to Another Zelda, or Zelda's Flip Side. And that's what this new Ura was gonna be, a continuation of that old tradition, but more ambitious. Miyamoto said there'd also be, quote, the random element. Every time you go in a dungeon, the composition will be different.
I'm starting to see why this one got cancelled, because how the heck do you do anything? Oh boy, that's... So wait, how would... Trying to create a Zelda game with procedural generation. Yeah, I'm starting to see the issue here.
For example, if a treasure chest was in a certain place the first time you entered a dungeon, it won't be there next time, it'll be somewhere else. We wouldn't be able to design our own dungeons, but we could, quote, download new dungeons and share data with other players. Potentially hundreds of dungeons, he said. In another interview, he teased, "We've already talked about a network Zelda as an interesting idea. The assistance of other players in the network could motivate a player's active participation instead of the traps or secrets that I create."
Okay, so interesting given what they would do with the Link's Awakening remaster later on, but never mind me.
We asked Giles Goddard, an Ocarina dev sitting next to Miyamoto in that interview, if they actually worked on those network features, and what were they?
Of the traps or secrets that I create. Do you recall any specifics regarding work on this network Zelda that have never made their way into a finished Zelda game?
Yes.
Are you allowed to say them?
Okay.
And I want to stay alive, so say what?
Unfortunately, those features are still a secret. During the last 2 years of Ocarina of Time's development, Miyamoto teased a lot of ideas for its expansion, but eventually narrowed the scope down to just remixed dungeons. But director Aonuma didn't want to do it.
I mean, I'd be hesitant on doing that too, because the dungeon design is the bread and butter, especially back in the day. Giving a degree to which it can be shaken up could lead to wildly varying player experiences, and therefore tarnish what would otherwise be a really good thing.
As he didn't think it could properly be called a new game.
That's not my contention, but okay.
So a bargain was struck. A skeleton crew would keep making Ura, while the rest of the team developed a full sequel, under the condition that they only had 1 year to do it. Miyamoto...
Wait, hang on, that was why Majora's Mask only took a year? It was mandated? Damn.
Told the press he was serious, and if Aonuma couldn't hit the deadline, he'd cancel the sequel. Luckily, they managed to pull it off, and Majora's Mask released in early 2000.
Jeez. I mean, you get to reuse a few assets here and there, and you've got the skeleton in place from the engine, but jeez.
Miyamoto announced soon after that, Ura Zelda was finished, and since the 64DD flopped, maybe he would sell it as a $20 cartridge. But the Nintendo 64 generation was coming to a close, so he kinda didn't know what to do with it. A couple of years later, GameCube was struggling, so they decided to give it away as a pre-order bonus for Wind Waker to help boost sales. In English, it's Master Quest, but in Japanese, it's still called Ura. After all of those years waiting though, a lot of fans were disappointed. This was even less ambitious than Zelda 1's Ura. Where was the randomization, downloadable dungeons, and network features? Many were convinced the real Ura was locked away in a vault somewhere. In reality,
maybe the real Ura was the friends we made along the way.
Though, most of its grand ideas just never got developed, and this was all that remained. A decade later, Ocarina got remade for the 3DS. This was closer to the original vision. The entire game was flipped left to right, enemies dealt double damage, a new boss rush, and of course, remixed dungeons. It was a nice second quest, but still couldn't live up to the promises and hype of the original, the legendary, Ura Zelda.
Well, at least it's something, so fair enough.
I have recommended your services to my employers, and they have authorized me to offer you a job. They agree with me that you have limitless potential.
Oh yeah, this is the Half-Life thing that was mentioned earlier. What crazy nonsense is gonna lie within? Let's find out.
In 1998, the only game that won more Game of the Year awards than Ocarina of Time was Half-Life. It had the atmosphere, cutscenes woven into gameplay, and a story worthy of...
Technically, there were no cutscenes, but yes.
...of an RPG. On PC, it broke records and sold 10 million copies, leading the entire genre to reshape itself in Half-Life's image.
Yep. It basically pioneered the scripted sequence that Call of Duty would then run into the ground.
From the shooting galleries of old to the immersive worlds of today. You play as a Black Mesa scientist, the day an experiment goes haywire and opens a rift to another dimension. Aliens pour in, followed by the US government rushing to cover it up and kill the witnesses, including you. A couple of sequel expansions followed, each telling the same story from a different perspective, a US Marine and a security guard. But in 1999, one more game was in development called Hostile Takeover.
Oh?
Where you'd play as a junior G-man in training under the watchful eye of the interdimensional bureaucrat himself.
Interesting. That could have been fascinating. Why'd that get cancelled, I wonder?
Wearing the same suit, trying to work your way up the corporate ladder, that kind of thing. The story started in an underground mining facility called Allied Processing, where workers portal to other dimensions, grab some minerals, and then teleport back to ship them to Black Mesa. When the science experiment goes south, all the miners start burning the evidence, as they know the government's coming to seize control. Hence, the game was called Hostile Takeover.
Okay.
Together with Allied Processing security forces, you'd have to fight your way above ground, past aliens, head crab-infected monkeys, and other new enemy types. After escaping to the surface, the military would arrive and you'd have to shoot your way out. All along, G-Man observes you from afar, till near the very end, where he'd then nuke the facility. The other expansions were made by Gearbox, but this one...
Hang on, doesn't he nuke the facility anyway in Opposing Force, if I remember correctly? Yeah, I guess that's quibbling.
Was developed by 2015 Inc., with Valve writing the story. The game was 60% finished, then one day, Valve sent a note saying it was cancelled. We talked to Benson Russell, one of Hostile Takeover's core designers.
Everyone was pissed. I was a co-owner of the company and I got called in, and they handed the note to me. I read it and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, why? We're making good progress. We have all these good things to show. Like, we don't understand, like, why is this? It was a big mystery to the company in that regard. And then later on, talking with other people and realizing it's like, oh, okay, yeah, now it makes sense.
So what happened?
Long story short, 2015's CEO was a bit of a control freak and was just plain difficult to work with. Valve head Gabe Newell didn't want to put up with the drama anymore and pulled the plug so he'd never have to see him again. But was the game going to be any good?
You know what? Fair enough. Obligatory praise, Gabe Ben.
2015's previous work was well received, and after all of this went down, a lot of the devs were fed up with their boss as well. So they quit and formed their own studio, Infinity Ward, where they made the first Call of Duty, which reviewed better than the Half-Life expansions that did come out, leading to them making a dozen sequels. In other words, yes, Hostile Takeover would have been pretty good. Benson said if it sold well, they might have made more Half-Life expansions, so it seems an entire branch of the franchise got aborted just because one executive was completely insufferable.
Fascinating. Huh. Fair enough.
As of this video's publication, Hostile Takeover hasn't leaked online, but maybe someday. We've got a feeling about this one. Before wrapping up, we want to breeze through a few honourable mentions. While not strictly cancelled, in 1994 Square started making Final Fantasy VII for Super Nintendo, with a story set in modern-day New York City. Development paused to shift resources to Chrono Trigger, and then after coming back, the devs switched to a fictional setting and moved over to PlayStation. Nothing's been leaked, as the SNES version didn't seem to have gotten very far.
Fair enough.
In 1995, DMA Design, now Rockstar North, was making Kid Kirby for Super Nintendo, partially overlapping with their development of the first Grand Theft Auto. It was going to have 120 levels, and far enough along that Nintendo Power Magazine was even talking about it. But it was eventually cancelled, seemingly due to lack of momentum and poor sales of the Super NES mouse. Instead of controlling Kirby directly, it would have been more like Angry Birds, where you'd click, drag, and release to fling him all over the place. Rockstar also made Lemmings, so they definitely had the chops to make an interesting Kirby game. But unfortunately, no footage or ROMs were ever made public.
I have so many questions.
And finally, Pokemon Picross was exactly what it sounded like, Ash and the gang doing Picross puzzles. In 1999, it was previewed in Japanese magazines and development finished soon after. But Nintendo felt there were too many Pokemon games coming out around the same time, so they
imagine thinking that nowadays. Imagine reaching the point where people want less Pokemon when you were living in this glut. Jeez.
Delayed Pokemon Picross and then just kind of forgot about it. Eventually, the game found its way online as part of the third Giga Leak. Fans translated it, and if you want, you could play it today. That's the happiest ending you can have for a cancelled game, and a pretty good note to end on. We'll be back later with cancelled 2000s games, but until then, did you know there were over 60 cancelled 64 disk drive games? If you want a 2-hour rundown of every single one, click the video on screen. Or if you're sick of facts for a second, then you can always look at my most recent video. It's a documentary about frame rates and Switch 2 Welcome Tour, and it's...
Oh boy. Alrighty.
Very serious. I take pride in being a historian. Special thanks to our translator Jacob, the devs and preservationists who gave us their time, and Eurasia_M for footage capture. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.
Alrighty then, there we are. I guess we'll go ahead and call it there. So, let's see what time is it right now. Not the worst place to call it actually, given the circumstances. So, managed to get through a decent amount. Alright, let me just update everything on my side real quick. Okay, it is the... Alright, cool. And let me just update a couple other things. Let's see. Alright, yep, we'll go ahead and let that be that for tonight. So, to talk logistics briefly, the plan as of right now, with how Fallout is going, with the game being relatively simple, and therefore easier to pick up and put down, so far as I can tell, it seems to be ideal in a sense where I'm able to, ideal in the sense that there's not as much external pressure to just spend hours upon hours with it, but that also means that with it being easy to pick up and put down, that means it should be easy enough to get through the React backlog and to have something else running alongside it without necessarily having to have an entire extra stream day for it. So, my thinking right now is that we've got, let's see, how much do I have in the backlog as of right now? Let's see, there's 3 that I've put into it, a little bit for Xenoblade, but that'll have to wait until after everything's sorted for that. So excluding that, we've got 4 from you, 3 from you. So around a dozen videos in the backlog as of right now, to say nothing as to anything else that we may want to add in alongside that, since that I'm pretty sure while we were at this, a couple more things were added in. Yep. Oh, there's the video that Gilgamesh was talking about. Okay, so we've got this one, and then, let's see, another Pikmin one, which we won't worry about yet. Let's see, and then, yeah, so we've got 3 more that Gilgamesh just threw in. I'll have to go through and see if they're worth adding to the backlog, but either way, all that to say, we've got a decent amount to work through with respect to the backlog, and as a result of that, I'm going to start not strictly alternating. I think I'll have a couple Fallout streams and then a React night. And I'm going to follow that cadence until either I can get a dedicated day to knock out all of the backlog, which I can talk more about that once that I'm through the current IRL circumstances. And then, well, or we actually reach the end of it. Has the Frieren video been watched already? Yes, it has. So it was the second to last video we watched, so rewind about 30 minutes to 45 minutes and you should get about where we hit it. Remind me later and I'll try and add timestamps. I probably should be trying to add timestamps on stuff like this. Either way, for now then, is there anything else worth mentioning? Well, I guess to keep it brief then, I'll be doing a couple Fallout streams and then a React stream, and that'll be the consistent cadence until either Fallout or the React backlog is seen to. So, we'll have that to look forward to. Next time, so that means this time next week, it'll be back to Fallout. Oh, the humanity? Oh boy. Either way, that'll be all then for tonight. So, thank you all for stopping by. Is there anything else I need to see to in chat real quick? Okay, there's the request to add more, well, to check out stuff that was recently added to the backlog. Thank you for the stream. Yep, much obliged. Yep, looks like that's it. Alrighty. Once again, thank you all for stopping by. I'll see you all later. Have a good night.